I'd just go up to people, hey, you want to buy a zine? And I'll never forget, like more than once, multiple skinheads would just look at it and just take it out of my hand and walk away. And I'd be like, sorry, that's 50 cents.
Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, and today's a big one. Today we are talking about Minor Threat, the first 7 inches. This is, kind of what this whole podcast has been working up to until now. There are many great records in DC rock history, but this release stands up there as probably the best or one of the top 3 at the very least. If you're here, you probably know that already. And I will just say a note up top. With bands that have so much history, we get into as much as we can, but there's also just a flood of information out there that we try to wrap up into a 1-hour podcast. So we do our best. And luckily, we are joined by Scott Crawford, who literally made the documentary about the DC hardcore scene in the 80s. He made Salad Days, the documentary. He also did a documentary on Creem and has a new one coming out this year. He was the founder of Harp magazine and has just spent his life dedicated to cataloging rock and roll and hardcore and finding out other people's stories as well as sharing his own. We get to talk with him about his firsthand experience seeing Minor Threat and being a part of that scene way back in the day, writing zines, and all the way up to today where he still makes documentaries and works with Creem magazine. So much good stuff to get into. I won't delay it any further. Let's go ahead and jump into our hardcore history section.
Flex your head. It's time for some hardcore history.
Minor Threat formed in Washington, D.C. in 1980, rising from the ashes of Teen Idols, a band known for pushing the boundaries of the nascent hardcore punk scene. Vocalist Ian MacKaye and drummer Jeff Nelson, classmates at Wilson High School, joined forces with Lyle Pressler and bassist Brian Baker to create a new, faster, and more aggressive sound. The band's raw energy, stripped-down style, and unrelenting tempo helped define the hardcore genre in its earliest days. Minor Threat's debut EP, released in 1981 through their own Dischord Records, was recorded at Don Zantara's Inner Ear studio, with the local scene architect Skip Groff producing. The record exploded across underground circles, with tracks like Filler and Straight Edge becoming instant anthems. The latter inadvertently launched a movement. MacKaye never intended to start a subculture, but the song's message of personal discipline, abstinence, and authenticity resonated and gave rise to the global straight edge community. Later that same year, they released In My Eyes, another blistering 4-song EP that doubled down on all of their ideas of self-respect, DIY ethics, and rebellion against conformity. While their music inspired fierce loyalty, it also ignited debate. Songs like Out of Step created internal tension as fans and even band members grappled with how seriously to take the band's messages. Minor Threat disbanded in 1983, just as they were reaching the peak of their influence. A brief reunion in 1985 yielded the slower, more reflective Salad Days EP, but the band never returned to regular activity. Still, their discography, which totals just 26 songs, remains one of the most influential bodies of work in punk history. Minor Threat's fierce independence, uncompromising vision, and commitment to DIY culture continue to inspire generations of musicians, activists, and artists. Hello, and welcome to the DC Rock History Podcast. My name is Philip, or Fizz. My co-pilot, Alex Vidalis, is out tonight. So if this plane flips over, we are SOL. I have no co-pilot steering this ship with me.
It's Trump's fault.
It's Trump's
That's
fault.
right. Yeah. That's right.
We do have an exciting new segment. We have a returning guest for the first time. Eduardo Nunes, welcome back to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm the first returning guest?
You are the first brave enough to return.
Holy shit.
So instead of our normal question, your intro to the DC scene, what have you been up to since the last pod? That's what we'll go with today.
What have I been up to since the last pod? Well, this week in particular, I have been on a federal jury in a courthouse downtown And the judge she sent us home early. And on the walk home, I saw that she told the Trump administration to pay out the remaining USAID funds that they have been sitting on for God knows how long. And she is done fucking around with them, which is great because we spent all day in her courthouse talking about an entirely different case that had nothing to do with any of this. It's just one of those reminders of like how multifaceted even a federal judge can be. So yeah, I think that's my most recent highlight. Other than that, I've just been weathering the same shitstorm that all of our listeners have been dealing with too.
Well, you did send an all-time great email to the dcrockpod@gmail.com. You said the judge let us out early, so I'll be able to make it tonight.
It was true.
Which is officially the best thing we've ever received in our inbox. But welcome back. Without further ado, our other guest tonight is Scott Crawford, the documentarian, the writer, the organizer, and the friend. Scott, welcome to the DC Rock Pod. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
We'll start the way we always start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your introduction to the DC rock scene? I will say with a caveat, having watched your movies and read some interviews with you, I know a little bit about it. I know you were already going to hardcore shows when you were 12, 13 years old. So yeah, tell us all about what that was like and, kind of those early memories you have rocking in DC.
Let's see. So I guess, where do I begin? So if you've seen the film or if you haven't, it's Salad Days was kind of a film that I just felt like I needed to, it was like not a purge necessarily, but it was just a story that really, once I hit like 40, I went like, wow, this, looking back at my life at 40, when there was some stuff going on, divorce and stuff like that, just things that make you kind of look at your life. I realized that it's the one constant. It's the one thing that had remained in my life and that I had sort of taken with me. The lessons, not the lessons, but the sort of, the experience of it and what I took from it informed my life in ways that, I guess maybe I hadn't really thought about or considered until I really sat down and started to write an outline of what I thought would be a book about sort of my experience through the lens of me, but also, just telling the bigger story of what happened. But I thought the sort of coming of age aspect of it could be kind of interesting. And then I realized, well, if I wrote a book, then the best part of that story is the music. And so you're not going to be able to hear the best part. I mean, who wants to hear me ramble for, 100,000 words or something? So, or read it, so that's when I started to I had already had this outline of what I wanted to do. And that's when I started to do the documentary. But yeah, I started going to shows when I was, I guess the first show I went to, I was about 12 and was just so taken by the music and the experience, the sights, the smells, the whole thing. It was just completely changed my life. And I don't know what led me there necessarily. I mean, I wasn't, my family is not musical. Music was not played in the house. I mean, they didn't hate it. They're just kind of simple. Their taste level was not very good. It was not like I grew up listening to like Coltrane or something, or like, the Ramones or something. Anyway, yeah, somehow I found my way and was just taken by it and so grateful and blown away by the fact that all this music that I had been discovering at that point was made here. Like I didn't, Minor Threat, Scream, I'm trying to think of the other bands, like Teen Idols, like Flex Your Head, excuse me, that whole scene. I remember first buying those records because my best friend's older sister told me to do that. And I did. And I'm like, Dad, this is so great. I don't know what I'm hearing, but it was amazing. And then I look down and I see that the address is DC. And I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that, you come from, when you don't know much about music, you just think everything's played in stadiums and that people are wealthy and make a living out of this stuff. And, you know,
Yeah.
at least I did, you know, in the 80s. And then you realize not only is it being made here, but it's being manufactured. It's you know, there's a scene that exists. There's a community. And so, yeah, that was really intoxicating for me.
Yeah, I completely understand all of that. And you founded Harp Magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and DC's hardcore scene was so intertwined with zines.
Mm-hmm.
Was the zine culture from DC at all influential on you and how you got Harp off the ground? Or I apologize, I don't know much about the early days of Harp, but were those two things, was it an inspiration? Were you a part of the zine culture? Tell me more about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So uh, when when I first, I think I had gone to my third or fourth show, um, and started going to the record stores and hanging out and seeing all these other zines on the shelf. And I went, well, I can do that, you know, because it's really was the spirit back then, you know, still is, but was the spirit of 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 that culture was that, you know, anyone can do this. And once I figured that out, I realized, oh, I want to do this. So I did a fanzine. I put out a fanzine called Metrozine, and I did that for 3 years, actually, and interviewed all kinds of people. I think Ian MacKaye was actually my first interview, and it was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable to read now, because it might be one of the worst interviews ever. But I did. He was my first official interview that I did, and but yeah, so I spent years doing that, and just the fanzine grew and grew, and I love doing, you know, I would staple the whole thing. Like, I would do it at my mother's office on the weekends. I'd Xerox it, and then we'd come home and I'd lay it all out on the dining room table and staple all the pages together. And so, yeah, and then I did another so that I did that for about 3 years, until I hit high school. Uh, and then took a couple of years off from doing like zine stuff, and then started another zine called Noiseworks, which was just more of the same kind of stuff. But my world by then had gotten larger. You know, Metrozine was very like DC centric. Um, and then of course, you know, you realize, oh, you know, there's this whole not just punk rock. There's so much great music going on out there, and so um, and then that I stopped doing that. I think I did that for about 2 years, maybe. And that was paying for itself. And that was like, I was getting advertising and, you know, that would have been right around 90, 91. So that's right when the grunge thing was hitting. So major labels are spending tons of money on advertising. And so I was lucky to be a part of that, and did that for a couple of years. And then I played in a band. I didn't last very long. I quit, but it was a band called Clutch, which are still around
Yeah.
today. I played on their first record.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, and played guitar. And then yeah, and then life just happened, and got married, and you know, had a kid, and then I was doing pretty successful like freelance art direction stuff like that, and realized I wanted to do a magazine, and really studied what was going on out there. And it was in my blood already. I knew it, you know, that was all I ever wanted to do, is just make a living off of doing a magazine. And so that's when I started Harp, and which was, you know, looking back now, not a good name, but at the time it was like, I was thinking about like, you know, when people harp on something, when they're like obsessed over something, they harp on it. And because I think I got accused of that one time by a friend, like, stop fucking harping on that fucking record. Sorry, can I cuss?
Yeah, you can cuss.
So I think that's where it came from. I don't remember exactly, but it certainly was not the instrument. I was not thinking about, you know,
I see.
Joanna Newsom playing harp. But anyway, I started that, and that was like a glossy, you know, exactly what I wanted, you know, to do. And then it was bought by another publishing company, and I ran that for almost 8 years, and had a really good run with it. So,
I remember it. I remember it
oh,
well.
thank you.
Yeah. It was, you might like this, part of the contraband that someone snuck into my Christian sports camp, the
I
summer camp
love
that I
that.
was sent to.
Great.
Yeah, so
You could
we
probably
would
get
pull it
there.
out under. Yeah,
A thing like harp, like maybe no one would know. You know.
exactly. Harp and paste made it through the
Oh,
gates.
paste. Oh, don't get me started on paste.
I won't get you started. Because I have two questions for you. I have to circle back to one of the things you said early on because I'm a little younger and I wouldn't have had the chance to be at these shows. But did you say that you went to a show and saw the zines on the shelf? Is that what you
No, I'm
said?
sorry. I might have said that. I didn't mean to say that if I did.
Okay.
Although that actually that was a thing. I mean, not on a shelf, but I mean, people did have like I
That's
was
so
one of those
interesting.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would take my zine to shows all the time. In fact, there's a scene in the film where you see me. I'm outside of a club and I have a bag. I'm wearing a bag, and I was like, when I saw that footage, I never even remembered anyone ever shooting that footage. It was totally a shock to me when I saw that. But anyway, I was like, what is that bag? And I go, oh, right. Because I always had the bag of
Right.
the photo with the zines in it. So, and people, I was like this little guy. I mean, I was like maybe 90 pounds, 5 feet high, and
Yeah.
I'd just go up to people, hey, you want to buy a zine? And I'll never forget, like more than once, multiple skinheads would just look at it and just take it out of my hand and walk away. And I'd be like, sorry, that's 50 cents. I get, and they would just look at me and be like, fuck off. Kid." Um, so, but no, mostly you would see zines in the record stores. And when I say
Okay.
record stores, I mean like not the mall record stores. I mean like
Sure.
mom and pop ones, like the
Joe's
indie
Record Paradise, perhaps.
Exactly. That's a very big
Nice.
part of my education was Joe's.
Nice. Now I have to ask you, we'll get to the minor thread of it all soon, but I have to ask you a little bit about Salad Days. It's the definitive documentary on this era, on hardcore,
Thank you.
on Washington, D.C. music, aside from go-go. I mean, it is the best. I mean,
Thank
I've
you.
watched it many times. I've also watched your Creem documentary twice. Haven't seen the new one, but looking forward to it. As someone who has taken on a similar project of chronicling the DC scene, how long did that take you? And was it something that you dove into head first? I'll say for me, I was very reluctant. I did a kind of a pilot episode of this in 2018, and I just thought, I can't do this. It's too much. Did you have any sort of similar hesitation diving into a documentary about the scene, or was it more organic? How did that kind of bubble up for you from the magazine to, I know you then wrote online and then
Yeah, I
the
mean, I guess
documentary?
in a way, it was sort of a natural progression in some ways. I mean, it was still about documenting and it was still about telling a story and sharing experiences, which is with the magazine. I always wanted to have a unique perspective and really try to have a high standard in terms of editorial and the writing. And I was lucky to work with like amazing writers. But anyway, so yeah, I don't remember being really all that intimidated by it, only because I lived it, and so like I knew what my sort of story was, or the story that I wanted to tell. And I think probably one of the hardest things I think for me, it took about 4 years, I guess, to make the whole film, maybe a little longer. And I think I knew the story I wanted to tell, but what I think was interesting or challenging for me as I was making it is I realized like everyone that you interview, you're looking for a specific, or at least I was looking for specific things from specific people, and then you interview other folks where you want just a general overview, and then you may have like very specific pointed things for each person. But what I realized is, everybody has their story to tell, and my story is not correct any more than anyone else's. And I think that if you want to tell if you want to have a narrative of any kind, then you have to just own some of that and go, okay, well, this may not be his story or her story, but it's kind of, somewhere in between everybody's. And so you have to find that, like, I tried to find a happy medium, and it was important to me to find a balance too, in terms of, I didn't want it to be a love letter necessarily. And I didn't want it to be rose-colored glasses, like everything was this is the greatest scene of all. I wanted to show the warts too,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really important. So navigating some of that was
Yeah.
challenging at times. Not everyone. There were a lot. There were maybe 2 or 3 people that were like, you know what, I don't want to be a part of this, which was fine. It was unfortunate because I think their stories and their perspectives would have been really good for the film, but they got it in their head that I was telling a specific point of view. I'm not sure where that came from because there was no film to speak of, or there was, so that was just something they came up with on their own, which is fine. Um, but anyway, yeah, I'm rambling, but
This is great.
yeah,
No, this is great. This
Yeah.
is awesome.
I think too, I mean, what my response to Salad Days or Instrument or the recent crowdsourced Fugazi concert movie that I'm
oh right,
forgetting of,
yeah,
is just the feeling that every time, I moved to the States and to suburban Maryland in like 92, 93 to Rockville. And so by the time I was here, it was already clear to, yeah, it was like, you've already missed it. Like the good thing is over. Fugazi doesn't really play in town anymore. You can still go to Y&T Records, but like there was this pervasive sense that like I had like just missed all the great stuff. But every time I see those documentaries, like the gap between like 1988 and 1993 is really much smaller than it. And so my feeling is that, and I think it's probably true for anyone who was close to that or lived those days, is that you're also sort of telling our story, not to be, too hippie-ish about this, but it does feel like every movie about the DCC, and I think everyone who was even remotely close to it sees themselves in the story too and feels like it's and now there's a canon around it a little bit, right? The main structural elements are locked in place, and I think that's largely a credit to your work.
thank you, thank you. That means, yeah, I mean that's wow, yeah, thank you. That means a lot. Uh, yeah, it was just it was important to me, and I still maintain this. I mean, we're still talking about the film, and it came out 10 years ago, but like it was um there was something so special about DC, and I know that's weird for me to say because people go, oh well, where else did you live? I don't have anything to compare it to, but I know enough to know that uh I've been to enough shows, or I've read enough to know that like DC was very different than New York City, very different
Mhm.
than Boston, very different than LA, and that's an understatement. I mean, when I think about going to Yesterday and Today, as you mentioned, and in the '80s, and asking the guys in Rites of Spring who worked there, Brendan Canty or Guy Picciotto, or at that point, what do you guys listen? What are you listening to, or what should I be listening to right now? And they'd play me. I remember me going like, who is this? And it was the Church. It was Mission UK. I remember, and the Chameleons. These are some of the bands I remember them playing. But so, but I think if you had gone to Boston, and I love everyone in Boston, but I think if you had gone to Boston at that time, I don't think they would have been playing I don't think bands in that town were listening to that music at that point. I mean, you look at break down Rites of Spring, any Rites of Spring song, and they're great jangly pop songs. I mean, that's what they are. They're not. It's not like what was happening in LA or New York, where you had, let's use New York City because I'm jumping around. New York City, like super aggressive, like hardcore, like macho dudes in sweatshirts, like all cool, if that's your thing. But like the Cro-Mags didn't really play all that well in DC. Like, I mean, they drew an audience, don't get me wrong, but it was just, I don't know if I'm making sense, but there was an, and I don't want to sound highfalutin or like elitist or anything, because I'm not trying to sound that way. I'm just simply just trying to say that there was a difference in aesthetics. And
Yeah.
and and it was also interesting to me to explore how these words that we use every day now in our sort of vernacular came from DC in the '80s. Straight edge, emo. These were all words that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And
Let me jump off that if you
yeah,
don't mind,
yeah.
because I've been thinking about this a lot. This is our first sequel episode, so to speak, because we'll do a Teen Idols episode, but we're gonna pick up here on Minor Threat. So Ian and Jeff were in Teen Idols with Nathan Strajek and Jordy Grindle. And speaking of the church, Jordy or his girlfriend were getting kind of religious. This wasn't really working. For this and other reasons, Teen Idols break up. But to hold on Teen Idols for a second and what you're saying, Teen Idols to me feels more like it belongs in the New York, or actually even more specifically, the UK punk scene lineage, right? It has more indebted to The Damned or Discharge. And then to what you're saying about like bands not playing well, um, Minor Threat just seems to come so fully formed, and they don't overstay their songs. They play short songs. They get in, they get out, and um, you know, the speed, the tempo's been raised in a lot of cases, and Ian's on vocals now, and it's just like it just is a game, not only a game changer, but also basically one of those rare instances of right from the jump, you have something that works and is gonna change what's gonna come after it. Um, do you guys remember the first time you heard Minor Threat?
Um, yeah, I do. I was sitting in my friend's sister's bedroom and she played it for me. And I think my initial the thing that I loved the most initially was that they said fuck a lot. Um, Ian love to use that word. And so I was immediately like, as a 12-year-old boy, this band is amazing. Then you realize that they wrote great songs and they were,
Yeah.
and so, um, yeah, they really, that band, it's such a cliche. I hate using this term, but, cause I hear it so often, but it really did, change my life, or at least alter the course of my life. I mean, everything I trace everything back to Minor Threat, and everybody has probably that band where everything starts there. The Minor Threat is that band for me. So
Yeah. Eduardo, what about you?
Yeah, it would likely have been for me, at an Amnesty International, like, letter writing party, like the high school Amnesty International Club, which, of course, was run by all the sort of Positive Force kids at my high school.
Cool.
And it was sort of like, it was just an excuse for people to sort of, um, speak extemporaneously about bands that other people should know about, and so that's how I was exposed to, like, Nation of Ulysses and, Tuscadero. My gosh, so much of that,
oh, yeah, Tuscadero,
yeah,
Mount Pleasant.
so, yeah, I have yes, I have lovely memories of just, like, being at someone's parents' house's basement, writing letters at, like, 11 p.m. to some far off place about human rights things, and appropriately, we were listening to DC hardcore.
That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and if we take it back to the scene report and kind of how we get to how Minor Threat gets to their first releases and how they form and their influences. They go see Ian goes to see The Damned, and that's a really pivotal moment. I think Bad Brains are opening, and that's sort of a spiritual experience for Ian and Henry, and they kind of go out not only jacked up wanting to play music, but also wanting to play faster, wanting to play more impressively. I think whether it was that night or over the time, or over time, going to see Bad Brains, the PMA starts to sink in. So, positive mental attitude is a big thing that HR and Bad Brains are. I'm not preaching, but espousing. They're advocating for not just the previous way of thinking, which is anarchy in the UK, burn it down, you know, sort of the first wave of UK punk, or the first wave of punk that's been sent back to the US, and theirs has more of a mindfulness that really obviously ebbs with what Minor Threat is going to do. And so, like I mentioned, Ian and Jeff move over from Teen Idols. They pick up Lyle Pressler and Brian Baker, and yeah, the rest is history. So, do you all have anything you'd like to say before we get into a little listening section?
I think just from having spoken to everyone in Minor Threat at this point about that, I think you mentioned the Bad Brains. Well, two things. First of all, the Damned, huge in this town. Like they're, I don't know what it was about. I mean, other than they're a fucking great band, but they were. Every time I went to Yesterday and Today, they were always playing, some Damned record. And it's why I named my production company New Rose Films. It's like,
Nice. Yeah.
So they're the Damned and Wire,
Yeah.
really big in this town. And I know Ian was a big Sham 69 fan as well back in the day. But anyway, I think the Bad Brains are really, having spoken to them all now about this, the Bad Brains are really the band that like upped the what's up the level, the expectation, and the sort of this is what we should aspire to. And they were so, the Bad Brains were so tight, and they were so and Minor Threat, same thing when you watch live footage of them, extremely tight. And the way Lyle plays, I have such a, and Brian too. I mean, there's just their musicianship was, I don't know if people talk about that enough, but like their musicianship was like incredible. Like when you think about, they were kids, they were 18, 19, 20 years old. I mean, anyway, sorry, I could ramble all night, but it's just I think maybe that's not talked about enough. The level of musicianship, and was just insane, So, and again, I think it's because of the Bad Brains, in my opinion, and based on just what I've gleaned from talking to those guys.
I mean, I'll piggyback on that and just say that I feel like even during my high school years, which were largely spent seeing hardcore bands in non-commercial spaces all around, right, Montgomery County and DC, there was an expectation that like high school bands should be really good and should be worth seeing. And I don't know, like I wasn't in a band, so I don't really know how the gatekeeping really worked, or how those norms got kind of enforced and passed along. But this was, even then it felt like this was just not a place that like would suffer mediocre bands. And in fact, you wouldn't see mediocre bands playing that many shows after a while. So
Exactly. That was,
yeah.
like I said, there was an expectation, a certain level, I think, that you were expected to be. And if you didn't meet that, then you weren't going to last. And I think it wasn't just about musicianship. It was also just about commitment. And like you weren't, like, no one's going to want to see you again if you come out on stage and you're drunk, or you're clearly fucked up. Like that just wasn't, and that's not even a straight edge thing. That's just like a courtesy thing. Like, don't, like, commit to this for the night, and make it the best set you can make it. And doesn't, you don't have to be musically great, but just commit to the night and to the audience. And so there, I'm trying to think of like a good example of a band that, I mean, I don't want to get into names, but there were bands that were, definitely not, that were not straight edge, and it was pretty clear when you saw them. But yeah, I do think there was an expectation, and that started way back when with the Bad Brains. And I think that, that, like I said, even if you weren't great musically, you didn't have to be. It was more about how committed you were, and how what you're willing to give, and not just on that night, but to the community, to the scene. What, were you being, were you contributing to what was going on? Were you out there like supporting and seeing your, other bands and doing all this? I think there was just an expectation for all of that. Like, why would we not do that? We're part of this community. There wasn't like rock star bullshit of like, we're gonna like hang out backstage and not check out the opening band.
Well, you're in like a student center or something or equivalent with like picnic tables somewhere under harsh lights. There's really nowhere to hide. You really have to bring energy and sort of command attention
It's true.
because there's not going to be anything to bail you out.
Yeah, well, I love it. On that note, let's listen to the ultimate scene call out song. We're going to start with Filler. So that's Filler, and let's come back and Scott, I'd love to circle back to what you were just saying in terms of the scene and the other side of you don't want to go on stage fucked up. You want to go hang out with one another. Of course, at this same time, Dischord Records is springing up. These are some of the first releases on that. What do you remember, or what have you learned about those early days of them kind of becoming a label? And personally, I'm fascinated. I'm in a band. I've gone through the vinyl production process twice. It's exhausting.
Yeah,
It
it
takes
is.
up so much time. The
Yeah.
graphic design is hard.
Yep.
There's nothing about it that's easy. So, what do you know, or what do you remember about like those early days of the distribution and getting connected, how they got connected to production plants and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was there weren't really great distribution companies that were in place. I mean, you had like trying to think, you had like Dutch East, and you had Systematic and a few others back then, but they all went under. I mean, they were good for like a minute, and then they would just sort of disappear. So a lot of it was like word of mouth, and that's kind of how you learned about stuff.
And it comes back to the zines, right?
Exactly, and the zines
Yeah.
served that purpose. I mean, the zines were our internet. It sounds so damn old, but that's really like that's how you. I mean, it's really the only reason that I did a zine, and I guess it's the only reason. Maybe you could probably argue why I'm still documenting this stuff in not just DC, but in general. It's just because I just want to share it with people. Like, and that like you're enthusiastic about something, and that's really a fan zine. It's called a fan zine because you're a fan of the music, and so the inspiration behind doing it is not financial. I mean, you're not doing this to make money. You're doing it because you've discovered something and you want to share it with the world. And so At least
I'm going to
that's
start calling this the DC rock zine, pod zine.
I mean, that's my take on it. That's how I thought at the time. So anyway, but so yeah, and looking at those records back when I was a kid, there was such a mystery to them. Like to me, like the graphics, like Jeff Nelson's graphics were so incredible, and they weren't, like going back to what I said about like other scenes, like it wasn't like there was a sort of a, I don't know what, it's just an aesthetic. I can't put my finger on it. It's just, if you look at the first Flex Your Head, not the X's, but the one with the cello, I mean, I can't think of anything less hardcore punk rock, like quote unquote, than a cello, on the front of a hardcore compilation. But how cool is that? I mean, how
Yeah.
cool is that? So it just goes back to that. And but yeah, it just seemed mysterious to me. And it seemed, looking at, staring at pictures of Ian and Jeff and Lyle and Brian, everybody in that
Yeah.
band. And then, or, still screaming, looking at the back and seeing the
Yeah.
photo of the band. They all just seemed so like intimidating and sort of scary and otherworldly. I don't know. That's how I saw it.
No, I've spent a lot of time looking at digitized copies of zines recently and researching stuff, and it strikes me that it's not the tone is not so different than the internet. The wit is not that different, but the pace that you can receive it and respond to it is so different, and that seems to me to be so much more humane. If someone makes a joke that you don't get, oh, guess what? You have to kind of sit with it and think about it for a second, or you have to, if you're really upset, maybe write a letter and tell
Yeah.
them why you disagree or whatever. And sure, I'm sure like disputes, like there were tons of fights that were born out of zine culture and all
For
that
sure.
stuff. But at the same time, like it's so much more humane to have to like kind of just sit with something, process it, and then wait for the next thing, as opposed to the endless scroll that we're all just waiting for, more doom into our eyeballs.
I think it invites a sort of thoughtfulness,
Mhm.
because you got to, I mean, you can't just, I mean, you can, and, I don't know if you read Maximum Rock and Roll back in the day, but that was like my zine back in the day. And the letter section was like, it's just like the comments section now on any given Instagram post. But I would get letters, from people like, disagreeing with me about something. And but you had time to really sit with yourself and to try and write something, you know, coherent and something hopefully thoughtful, not just, ranting and raving. But I did get those too. But yeah, no, it's just a different way to. I think that's a really great point, and I haven't really ever considered that in that way. But I think that's a really astute. I think that's really interesting.
There's a secret history of like zine beef as as a function of like regionalism and hardcore
Yeah,
scenes and all that. Like
Yeah.
there's a really engaging coming of age type novel to be written there.
for
Someone
sure.
One of your
Yes.
listeners should get on that, Fizz.
Yes, I
Yes,
will
please
buy it.
get on it and give us 10%.
Yes,
Um,
I'll be first to buy it.
uh, moving right along. Next up, we'll play Straight Edge, and I mean, this is one of the most impactful songs that we'll have. Um, Chris Richards was recently on this podcast, and he said,
Oh, Chris.
"Someone, someone turns 16 every day. That's part of why this music is important." Now, I don't think straight edge is limited to being 16. I don't mean to imply that, but there's certainly a time in your life when you're making choices about, am I going to drink? Am I going to not? That peer pressure and those things are very real in your life, where when you get older, you can choose your circles and all that. I will say, I have a friend who is straight edge, self-proclaimed, and it's so funny because I know that it's simultaneously tongue in cheek for them. They say it as a joke, but then it's also sort of a safe harbor for them to kind of be seen by other people, cool people like Ian have advocated for what they're doing. So it's a funny like you're saying, Scott, like the term is completely ubiquitous. I'm sure, your grandma might say it or something now. It's so
My
in the
kids say,
air, you just hear it.
yeah.
Yeah. And, but it's also something that still sort of resonates for people. So with all that preamble, let's get into the rock and roll. Gents, we're rounding out the podcast here. We have time for 2 more songs, thankfully, because these are hardcore songs. But why don't we, each of you, if you want to choose one from the first 2 7-inches that we'll listen to and talk about. Eduardo, want to kick it off? What anything from these tunes that you got to hear?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I definitely wanted to. I wanted us to play straight edge on the show, for sure. And I feel like, I still know people. I'm actually thinking of someone who's my age. I'm 47, 8 now, 7, something like that, in that neighborhood. Thank you. And a friend of mine a few years ago, I remember, who had stayed straight edge up until that point in her life, and then she went through a bunch of things. Was sort of like, I feel like maybe I can do stuff now. I feel like maybe I can drink. I feel like maybe I'm going to eat some pot and see how that treats me. And that was such a sweet, she was like Facebooking about it. I just thought that was like such a touching thing, that like something from her teenage years stayed with her until her 40s. And then she was like, gee, is this really like where I want to go with this?
Yeah. Well, if you need a recommendation, I can pass you one.
Well,
or you tell me.
No, I wanted to say something quickly too about, I know we're not going to play it, but I think it's notable that Salad Days is like an anti-nostalgia song from someone in there who's like 24 at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe
And is like
younger. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just remarkable, I think.
I remember, real quick, just to add to that, I'll never forget, he's in the film. He's a good friend of mine. He's kind of my big brother, really, especially during that period. Kenny Inoue, who played in a band called Marginal Men. And I remember him, I don't know what, it's just the weird things that you remember as a kid. But I remember when Salad Days came out, the 7-inch came out, and he heard it before I did. And he called me. And I guess I was probably on my way to buying it or something at the record store. But I said, how is it? Because back then, like, I wasn't, I wasn't privy to like hearing this shit before it came out, and he said that the first time he listened to it, he had just bought it, and he said he broke down, and cried. And I said, well, I couldn't, as a teenager, I couldn't really. And he said, because the lyrics, I understand what he's saying. And this is a guy that had been going to shows since since like 1980. So, and had seen the changes and had seen how everything that Ian was talking about in that song. And so that song has always had a special place for me. And, and, again, bringing this back again, the term Salad Days is a Shakespearean term. I mean, we're talking about like punk rock kids.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, but was Agnostic Front, dropping Shakespearean, song titles? Not, or terms.
Not as much. Yeah.
They weren't. So anyway, again, I don't know.
With all that, we got to play it. We can't. This is a podcast. Rules are made to be broken here. So let's give that away.
Okay.
We can't.
Gotta play that song.
I love it. I love it. Let's listen to Salad Days.
on our memories. But there are no facts. On at the earth! Where do I get up? On be the bastard! The door's getting soft. Do you remember the time? I don't know. In fact, about, 3 years ago, that was something new and exciting. And, they're hanging out. There's some people who do each other like this. And they help you out. You see a pump. Yeah, how you doing, man? That was real cool. Yeah, what happened, man? These things.
All right, that was Salad Days.
What a great! I still get
Mhm.
goosebumps when I hear that opening bass line.
It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
It's great stuff. But yeah, I believe it or not, we've come to the end of our time. So, Eduardo, I know you had a closing thought you wanted to share, and then Scott will pass it to you for the last song.
This is just a quick little thing, and then I'll get out of the way and let Scott bring us home. But I remember it's funny to think of these sort of pre-internet days, and the way information traveled from different scenes or whatever. So I remember going to college in Ohio and meeting some punks from Michigan, and they were convinced that the whole straight edge thing was bullshit. It was a front. That like these guys were like backstage, like blowing rails and just like And I'm just gonna say that at the time I knew they were wrong, and history has proven me right because one of them ended up being a mouthpiece for the Koch brothers. So
Whoa!
I'm just gonna let that sit out there.
Yeah. Hmm.
So they were projecting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, before we toss it to Scott, we of course want to open the floor for any plugs. Eduardo, do you have any plugs that will be relevant in the late spring?
In the late spring, we
2025.
are, Kevin and I are still going to be plugging away at Discologist, talking about some new music, and I will probably still be going to hopefully 3 or 4 shows a week. So hopefully I'll see you at one of those.
Love it. Yes, because we dove way into Eduardo's background on our last episode where he was with us, the Fallen Angels episode. I forgot to mention he's the host of a great podcast, Discologist, and a member of the Wammies committee.
Oh, right, I am.
And among other things. And so, but I'll make sure to mention that in the intro. But Scott, yeah, any other closing thoughts or things you want to plug?
Yeah, no, I think this was great. I guess if I was going to plug, well, there's a couple things. So I'm working. There's the latest documentary that I've done is called Something Better Change, and it's a film about Joe Keithley. Joe Keithley, otherwise known as Joey Shithead, was in a band or is still in a band called DOA, who were sort of the when you talk about 80s hardcore punk legends, it was like DOA, Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Black Flag. DOA was the band you might have, if you're a dork like me and you've read things about that period, you might have heard about the sort of roadmap that like bands like Black Flag had. It was just a list and phone numbers, and clubs. DOA were the ones that Joey was the one that created that list and gave that list to Black Flag, who then gave it to Minor Threat and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, so fast forward, whatever. Yeah. What the hell is it? 45 years later. And DOA, they were always a political band, but Joe actually ran for office in his hometown outside of Vancouver in Canada in 2018. And it was a total, like, no one expected him to win. Total David and Goliath kind of thing. And it was him up against another Green Party candidate. And he won. And this is 2018. So this is right in the middle of Trump. And Trump won. And I was really looking for just any sense of hope to sort of latch onto. And when I saw that, I went, wow, that was just really an inspiring moment. So I reached out to Joe and said, hey, can we document not just the DOA story, but your upcoming election in 2022, because it's a 4-year term. And he said yes. So basically, the film follows him as he goes on the campaign trail, knocks on doors, and does what he does. And I said to him, like, win or lose, warts and all, that's the film, So, and so that's what we did. And so that's doing, we premiered it at the Woodstock Film Festival in September of this year, or I'm sorry, of 2024. And it's, when is this coming out? In the spring, you said?
In the spring, yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I'm not supposed to announce it yet, but it's playing at the Florida Film Festival, as well as a couple other film festivals I'm not allowed to talk about. But anyway, so that's coming out in the spring and summer, and then it'll be doing like a small theatrical run throughout Canada and America. So please, if you see it listed or you see it, if you follow me on Instagram at Salad Dazed with a Z, Salad Dazed, I'll post updates on that film. I'm also working on a compilation album that'll be coming out in the summer. It's the 40th anniversary of Revolution Summer. So it's bands that are current bands in DC, and a lot of most of whom you can connect the dots back to Revolution Summer. So
yeah.
So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome. Yeah. You have a lot of really great things going at once. Your Instagram is, of course, a lot of fun. Your movies are great. Your writing is great.
Thank you.
Both of you rock. Thank you for hanging out with us on the DC Rock History Pod. Scott, what should we go out on?
Oh, man. We got to keep it to the 7 inches, right?
Who cares? We've blown the doors off. Anything you want.
All days, right? Okay. Look Back and Laugh.
Love it.
Ooh.
Here's Look Back and Laugh.
I want to tell you a little story, and it makes me warm inside. It's about some friends growing up, and all the things they tried. I'm not talking about stable shit, they want something more. I think it was too much dreaming, too much to hope for. One day something funny happened, but it scared the shit out of me. Their heads went different directions, and the friendship ceased to be. Said one day something funny happened, but it scared the shit out of me. Their heads went different directions, and the friendship ceased to be. Some days we'll look back and laugh.